Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Claire Thayer, Vice President, Business Development with MCOL. We're glad to have you join us for today's special presentation on commercial agility to maximize your life sciences business. Today's webinar is co-sponsored by LexisNexis. Our speaker is Darryl Williams, Head of Global Master Data Management and Platform Solutions at LexisNexis Healthcare. Before we begin with today's presentation, we do have a couple of housekeeping items. Darryl will be taking your questions via chat. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. However, you are welcome to submit your questions now and at any time throughout the webinar using the chat feature. While a PDF version of the presentation will not be available, we will, however, be sending a link to other materials on the LexisNexis Life Sciences website, along with the feedback evaluation form, which will be emailed after today's webinar. And lastly, if you require any other assistance, please contact the Healthcare Web Summit office at 209-577-4888. Darryl, we're now ready for you to begin.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'd like to begin with an overview of today's webinar. We'll go for about 45 minutes and hopefully have time at the end for questions. I want to start talking about the variety and volume of traditional and non-traditional data from various sources and what that means to our industry. Then we'll cover commercial agility and what it means in the context of progressive life sciences organizations. Then we'll go into some detail on how to extract insights through various perspectives of the same core information that's been collected. And then finally, we'll cover practical applications of the strategy. So with that, I'd like to start with a survey question, get the blood pumping for everybody that's joined. Please select the functional area or organization that best describes your focus within the organization. So either marketing and sales, technology or information or data governance, compliance, finance, clinical, R&D or medical affairs. Are you a consultant or a third party to a life sciences company, or other? So here's the survey. Please select the category that best fits your description. Going to give about 10 more seconds for responses. I think this will just be helpful to get a general sense for the audience as well of who is participating, kind of what your area of responsibility is, and that might help to guide some of the content going forward. So with that, let's go to the results. Okay. All right. So as I predicted, definitely a heavy focus in the marketing and sales area. Glad to see that we do have some participation from the clinical, R&D, and med affairs, because sometimes that's an area that is getting more and more integrated into information governance as it relates to life sciences companies. That's great. And also a lot of third parties. So very good. Thank you for that. All right, I want to start talking about the data. Remember I said I wanted to talk about the variety and volume of these different data sources. There's a really great bit of content from Forbes called 20 mind-boggling facts that everybody should read about big data. Now, the first one is that, and this is this exponential growth of information. More data has been created in the past 2 years than in the entire history of the human race. That's a pretty phenomenal statistic, and it continues in that fashion, meaning the further and further we move into the future, data is being created at an exponential rate. And this is mostly because of the various different forms in which data can be captured. We now have, in addition to servers and websites and laptop computers. We now have mobile devices, phones. We have the Internet of Things. So many different ways in which information will be captured. The other interesting fact is by 2020, our accumulated digital universe of data will grow to 4.4 zettabytes, which is 44 going up to 44 zettabytes or 44 trillion gigabytes of data. This is an enormous amount of data, and it continues to grow at this rapid rate. So what does that mean in terms of how organizations are going to handle that? Well, these are what I would call some of the non-traditional data sources that the industry has not necessarily become accustomed to handling. So first, let's talk about traditional versus non-traditional. Most of you are probably very, very familiar with the standard type of data that you come across, whether it's for sales operations or for forecasting or for performance monitoring, things like factory sales, which is the internal information that you capture related to the product that's leaving your facility or leaving your manufacturing sites. There's also syndicated market data, which you either purchase from some supplier that's pulling that together on your behalf, and usually it covers broad market data that you're able to use and get a sense of what's happening in various therapeutic areas. And then there's also the internal metrics that you capture either from SFA or CRM systems to measure sales operations data such as reach, frequency, promotional response to any events that you might be holding or any promotional activities that are going on in specific geographic areas or among certain specialties. Very, very common data for our industry to work with. But there's also other common data that other industries away from life sciences have become extremely accustomed to using on a regular basis. For instance, public records. Things like residential information, getting a general sense of where people are located, where they work, where they've gone to school, whether or not they have any specific things in their past like their criminal history or whether they've been disciplined by any particular state board or organization that they're a part of. And actually just very recently, information related to spend transparency. Now, the concept of spend transparency is relatively new. It's been around maybe for about 20 or 25 years or so, but just recently we've had this new type of transparency associated with the federal government as it relates to spend on healthcare practitioners, so-called covered recipients, and the interactions with applicable manufacturers. But there's also information associated with things like social media. So LinkedIn, Facebook, I'm sure that when you go to a conference or when you're meeting with someone, one of the things you may do very quickly is just look that person up on social media, see what type of activities they're involved with, see who they're associated with, what are their preferences. So these are some of the non-traditional sources which, although they've been available for a while, are now becoming part of the information landscape for life sciences customers to gain more insight on their customers and those people that they interact with in the marketplace. So now there's a new kind of common data that is becoming much more interesting and useful to the life sciences organization, and it's coming from other vertical components of the healthcare space. For instance, the payer space, where it's very common to talk about certain concepts such as capitation or bundle payments. So the idea of allocating a certain amount of funding to cover all of the healthcare costs for a given individual in a population and allowing those providers of healthcare to figure out exactly how to manage the health of those individuals with the resources that they've been given. There's also information associated with plans such as patient healthcare outcomes, right? Understanding that when individuals are being treated for certain disease states, whether or not they are having positive outcomes, how long it's taking that outcome to occur, and whether or not it's being done in the most efficient fashion. And then there's also information associated with providers. So understanding if you've been treated for a certain disease or a condition, do you have to go back to the hospital to be treated again because the first course of treatment was not as effective as it should have been? Or whether or not you've obtain some sort of malady based on being in a hospital or a clinic. So these are information sources which are not necessarily traditional to what we use in commercial environments in life sciences, but they're becoming the new type of data. It's becoming the new lingua franca of life sciences, to be familiar with not only payer data, member data, provider data, but also claims data, the activity that's happening in the field to understand how busy is a hospital and how busy are the practitioners in that hospital delivering care. And now think about that information linked back to other market data such as promotional spend, which we talked about before, sales data, prescriptions, inventory of product, healthcare networks and how those healthcare networks are delivering care. This is now becoming the new normal in terms of the data that is being used on a commonplace basis for life sciences companies. So what is the benefit of all of that? Well, there's really a tremendous amount of power of being able to link this common data to the new common data to obtain marketplace insights. Insights that previously may not have been available because the information sources were not linked and coalesced together in a fashion to allow you to gain such insights. That is the new state of information management in today's life sciences organizations. So with that, what I'd like to do is ask a question. This is survey question number 2. How many sources of data do you rely on to perform your job function? Now, in answering this question, what I'd like you to do is, if you work with one source of data to, let's say, get profile information, sales information, and let's say syndicated data, let's consider that 3 different sources, okay? So even if it might be coming from the same general place, those discrete things, think of those as individual data sources. So with that, are you in the range of A, 1 to 5 different sources of data, B, 6 to 10, or C, more than 10? All right, I'll give about 30 seconds to respond. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay. So based on these results, it looks like there's definitely a lot of different sources that individuals are working with on a regular basis to perform their jobs. A couple of interesting points of note here. Okay, so regardless of how many different sources you're working with, for each one of these sources, there needs to be clearly defined governance rules and policy about how the data is obtained, how it's verified, how it's incorporated into your internal systems and processes. You might even have to have governance on how it's shared with downstream users. Could be partners that you're working with. So you might have data coming in from these sources, being transformed internally, and then being shared with partners. There may be some restrictions. There might be third-party agreements that have to be taken into account on how that data is accessed and how it can be shared. So all of these things are part of information governance. The reason I wanted to ask this question and get a sense of the numbers is that it's very, very important to get an understanding of where the data is coming from, what you're trying to do with it, and what are the different things you may be bound by in terms of the way you use that data and the way you share it. It's all part of governance. Governance is something that has to be in place in order for a company to have a fighting chance of understanding exactly how it's using its information assets. Okay, got another survey question here. Question 3. Basically a true and false. I have the data and systems I need to easily drive actionable insights to support my business. A, true, or B, false? Okay, please give your answers. About 10 more seconds. Still have some answers coming in. Okay, so more than half of the audience saying that you don't have the information that you need. So think about this for a moment. If you don't have the information you need, can you clearly articulate what that information is and how it would be actionable for you and your organization? So the fact that more than half have answered, I don't have it, can you identify exactly what that is? Can you express the value that it brings to the organization, either in terms of increased efficiencies or increased revenues? Can you make the business case for why you need to acquire it? Do you have enough awareness of all the data that's available to you to perform your job? And if not, how do you gain that awareness to become more effective in what you do? Are there channels of information that are coming into your organization that you just don't have visibility to? It's there. You just don't know it's there. So what I'm suggesting is that your organization's approach to information governance could be either a help or a hindrance to you achieving that visibility, for flipping your answer from a false to a true. So that brings us to adopting a commercial agility strategy to gain advantage in the marketplace. So what exactly does that mean? What is commercial agility? So think of it this way. It's a way of being proactive, getting ahead of your competition by being able to quickly adapt in the marketplace based on environmental changes, whether they are perceived, verified, or predicted, for competitive advantage. So how do you do that? One way is by being able to implement commercial models. That's to say, changes to the way you currently do business to a new way based on insights about your customers, the way they're aligned with each other, the relationships that they may have in the marketplace. That includes the people who deliver healthcare to the population. It includes the organizations. It includes how those organizations are connected to each other. It includes the patients, so the people who receive the care, and the organization and networks that are invested in providing optimal care for the mutual benefit of all stakeholders invested. Remember that the healthcare space really is all about the patient. So all of these entities exist for that one common goal. In addition to that descriptive information about these customers, there's also related information about the customers that once you're able to collect it, centralize it, organize it, and aggregate it, it allows end users, analysts, managers, executives to gain undiscovered insights, all because these sources were integrated and available through a single channel. That includes sources such as master data, which is things like customer data, could be product data, market data, could be geographic data, could be alignment data, but these are all master data sources. They're the, as I've described in the past, the nouns of business, right? The people, places, and things, and how they're all connected to each other. And then there's the verbs, right? The actions, the activities, the transactional data that's in the marketplace. So the sales that occur, the scripts that are written, the claims that are processed and adjudicated, the nouns and the verbs coming together to make complete sentences and paragraphs, if you will, right, giving you the complete picture of what the marketplace looks like, and done in such a way that you're able to visualize and experience and manipulate the data in very different ways based on your individual need. This is really the key thing that should come out of this, is that commercial agility is about having actionable insights, and those insights come from being able to interact with the data in a way that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with, and that is giving you the ability to experience something that you've not experienced before, which hopefully is that actionable insight, that knowledge that you didn't have before, and now allows you to do something in the marketplace that makes you more competitive. So preparedness. How do you get ready? How do you prepare your organization to do this? Well, I'd like to look at it from three different pillars. So having access to all of this information really is not very actionable or useful without the ability to manage it and manipulate it for your specific purposes. So think about this continuum as a process that ensures that the data is accurate and complete so that these insights are clear and reliable. So these are the proactive things that could be done in an organization to allow you to implement the strategy. The first approach is organizational. And when we talked about some of the basic tenets of information and process governance, those are the things that are needed to enable such a strategy. When you think about organizational strategy, keep in mind that it's a combination of dedicated organizational roles and allocated individuals from various functional areas all working together to properly govern the information assets of the organization and the processes that use that information. A lot of times we talk about governance and we talk about the data, but we don't talk about the processes and the policies that go along with that. They go hand in hand. Another part of this is the organizational component. This is more, I would say, kind of a cultural component of it. It assumes that the traditional ways of interacting with your organization to implement change should probably shift to something that's more agile and adaptive, something that allows you to more efficiently and effectively achieve incremental organizational objectives more quickly. Now, this is not meant to preach about the agile methodologies, but it's really meant to say that there are some significant benefits from shifting the culture of the organization to be more focused on the incremental advantages as opposed to more drawn-out, longer strategies for implementing change that bring value to the organization much more quickly. The next one is the informational component. So I talked before about being able to bring relevant information into a centralized environment, whether it's physical or virtual, with these common modes of access. This is done to make the user experience more productive and more insightful, right? When you're interacting with data that's in a format that you are more comfortable with, you're able to get more insights from it. So for instance, if I want to give you directions someplace and I give you my point A and point B, my starting point, my destination, and then I show you that on a map, you're instantly able to get some insights. Oh, I have to cross that bridge. Oh, I'm going south as opposed to, north or west. Just gives you more than experience when you have an interface that gives you something that allows you to make those types of conclusions and draw those types of experiences from seeing it that way. The last area is the technical component. This assumes that organizations will become less invested in technical capital and be more users of information technology in a pay-as-you-go kind of manner, more of a using technical services. So since technology is changing so rapidly, organizations really need to become more focused on their core competencies and look to trusted partners for information technology expertise. So that means not trying to become experts in big data technology in your organizations, developing centers of excellence on how to use Hadoop or how to implement Spark. Really, it means, hey, okay, I know I need to use this technology because it gives me advantages. It allows me to manage these vast volumes of data in its various formats. I need access to it. So let me go someplace where I can get access to it and allow those partners to help me get what I need in the long run, as opposed to bringing all of that technology infrastructure and knowledge inside. Not the core competency of life sciences, and therefore should never be the focus of how you build your organizations. So, how do we gain these insights? Well, we gain these insights by pulling all these various components that I was talking about together. So, the nouns and the verbs. The verbs are the things that are claims, profile validation, predictive analytics, unit sales, transfers of value. all these are different types of verbs, right? Those action things, all surrounding that core master data, something that we like to call systems of care. These are those organizations and how they're structured and how they're aligned. Once you've gotten a really good picture of what that structure looks like, and you're able to associate all those other marketplace activities to that system of care, you are now in a position to start to bring all these different fact elements into the picture of getting insight about what a customer is doing or what's happening in a marketplace. It's a really powerful situation to be in, where now I've got all this information aligned with how my customers are structured, or at least the way I think they're structured, the way I interact with them, so that I can gain insights about how to address them in the marketplace. So what are the things that I need to know about these systems of care in order to be able to define it in a way to share with my organization? So you've got to ask yourself some questions. You know, what are the different components that make up the network? Is it a group of hospitals and clinics, group practices? Are they associated with other higher levels of networks? Which are the ones that are important to me? Which are the ones that I, in my business, on a day-to-day basis, need to understand in order to be successful commercially? What is the level of detail that I need? Do I need to know a hospital by every single department that's in that hospital, or do I need to know maybe just the major components, if there's a major cancer wing or there's a renal facility? That level of granularity that you need for your particular uses is very important in determining what that structure should look like. What's the share of your market versus competition? Do you have an understanding of what that therapeutic area that you're competing in truly looks like? And really what it comes down to is trying to figure out the answer to the question, how big is big? What's the size of the marketplace? What's happening out there? So that brings us to the commercial applications, and this allows us to answer that question, finding out how big is big. And then I also want to talk about leveraging transfer of value, transparency data in this approach of using commercial agility. So think of these as two general strategies for being effective with commercial agility. So, first question, systems of care. How big is big? In order to do that, you have to have a sense of how these organizations are structured, right? So I showed that graphic before where the systems of care are in the middle, they're in the center, and everything else kind of hangs off of them. How are they structured? This depiction just kind of gives you an idea of, in the healthcare environment, how are the practitioners, the providers, and the networks that are associated with them, how are they generally structured? This is meant to give a sense of what that connectivity looks like. What are those relationships like? So let's kind of build it from the bottom up. You have practitioners, and these practitioners are typically associated with some sort of healthcare entity. A hospital, a group practice, might be an individual practice, might be part of a long-term care facility, could be delivering care in a mobile treatment center, might be part of a home health agency or a hospice. So these are the different organizations that physicians work for. And not just physicians, advanced practical nurses, licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, physician's assistants, all the people who are involved in the healthcare space as practitioners. And the interesting thing is that for the most part, a lot of these individuals are associated in some way, shape, or form with multiple organizations. So the same individual can be participating in delivery of care to more than one of these facilities or groups. So those are the relationships I talked about before. So we're still talking about the master data component here. Now, these organizations typically align themselves in order to be more competitive in the marketplace, and the integrated delivery network is the structure that we're seeing that kind of is the dominant structure for providing more efficient care through these organizations. The interesting thing about these IDNs is that they have very interesting structure, or they have very flexible structures. They also have very flexible relationships with their networks. So here we're depicting that an integrated delivery network could have a child network that's associated with it. And that relationship could be different. It could be a specific ownership relationship, so direct ownership of one network over another. It could be an affiliated relationship, which is a looser, obviously, connection. It might entitle some sharing of policy, procedure, maybe even a little bit of infrastructure sharing. And then there are other relationships as well, things like a managed relationship, or it could be a joint venture. There could be a lease agreement. There could be some sort of managed care contract. So these are the various types of connections that are the descriptions of how the network components are associated with each other. In addition to that, we also have other organizations, such as group purchasing organizations. These are the entities that will get these various providers linked together to increase their purchasing power in the marketplace. You certainly can get much better pricing if you come to the marketplace in volume and represent a significant quantity of products and services that you want to acquire, as you could if you were acting as an individual organization. So these group purchasing organizations are extremely vital to the way in which the marketplace operates. And understanding who these groups are and who they are aligned and associated with is critical to understanding how to interact in the marketplace. Because, as we all know, so much more influence is coming from these higher level relationships versus the more traditional direct interaction with practitioners. Even though the practitioners are delivering the care at the patient level, they're also doing it in association with being part of specific plans, specific networks, specific hospitals, and those hospitals are aligned to the networks and groups we just discussed. So extremely important to getting an understanding of how the marketplace works. So that's just kind of to lay the groundwork of what these systems of care are like. Let's kind of walk through a scenario to see what that really means. So we'll take a fictitious organization, we'll call it Key Health System. We'll say that we want to look at this network based on a single product. We'll call it Product A. And we'll say it's in the multiple sclerosis diagnostic area. So when I'm looking at Key Health System, in this particular situation, there happen to be two child HCOs that are associated with a child IDN in this network. So essentially what that's saying is that when I just look at this product, I've set some thresholds that said, I'll give you an example. I'll say, in this case, if there are at least 1,000 multiple sclerosis claims for a given period of time, let's say for a quarter, I want to see what that facility looks like. So this could be 10 other organizations that are here, but because I've set a threshold and I'm looking at a specific therapeutic area and I want to understand product A, for my view of this data, the real areas of focus are these two particular organizations, Key Clinic and ABC Medical Center. So this is a way of starting to create this marketplace-specific view of the data, which allows you to look at an uncluttered perspective of the marketplace according to your needs. Now, if I were looking at another therapeutic area, this system might look totally different. But I've decided that I want to look at it this way, and as a result, this is what the focus looks like. I've got 213 associated healthcare practitioners who are acting in this space of multiple sclerosis and are writing claims or filing claims and writing prescriptions in that area. I also noticed that for product A, I've got a total sales figure of $2.34 million. So I'm starting to get an understanding in in my area of focus of how big is big. Now starting to be able to understand, if I know what the market looks like, I can see what our market share is in comparison to our competitors. So that's part of the thought process about trying to figure out how big is big and understanding what the potential of some of these organizations happens to be. So what you do, you go back to what I said before, which is look across the entire network. Now let's drop the individual focus on product A and multiple sclerosis. Let's look at the whole marketplace. And what I see is that there are a number of organizations that roll up to Key Health System, many more than what I was looking at before, many more affiliated HCOs, which are healthcare organizations, many more affiliated healthcare practitioners or HCPs, and the number of treated patients quite larger than what we were looking at before. And if I looked at just the claims for product A, so now I'm not looking at just the MS area, but I want to look across all of the products and take a specific view of product A, I can see across these various healthcare organizations that I have varying levels of claims being filed across these different organizations. And I'm able to see that from going from 400 plus thousand down to 117,900 patients are being treated for product A or using product A in this particular area. So this is a way of taking a large network. All this information has been collected and put into one repository, and when I focus it on a specific diagnostic area or therapeutic area, I'm filtering down from 453 to 117,000 patients being treated, starting to answer the question about how big is big. Now, if that's what the focus is on product A, what's the total number of patients across the whole therapeutic area? Well, that could be a lot higher number. In fact, we expect it to be. In this case, and this is an example, we're looking at potential patients of 133,000. So there's certainly room to grow in this space. And in order to do so, we can then look at the various activities at these various organizations and say, well, if I notice that I have high decile numbers for a particular organization, they are heavily involved in this therapeutic area, and I might want to make penetration there versus some areas which might be lower with lower total patients being covered. So those are the types of insights. If you're able to start pulling these sources of data together and visualizing them in such a way that you can look at it on a therapeutic area by therapeutic area basis or a product by product basis, very, very powerful for your interaction with the data and making those actionable decisions. It puts you in a position of asking that question. Okay, I think I've figured out how big is big. Start putting answers into those boxes, and now I can start to make plans on how to build my sales organization. What kind of skill sets do I need? Do I need people who are interacting with executives? Do I need people who are interacting with heads of departments? Do I need more folks who are talking to the individual practitioners? Really starts to allow you to think about the commercial models that you'll use in order to effectively interact in this marketplace. So what I like to do is move to the next survey question. So I want you to find out which category you fit in the closest. So do you agree or disagree with the following statement? I have the data and tools required to effectively determine how big is big for my specific product or market of focus. So this might be more for the marketing and sales folks, but if the others who are participating have any type of alignment to product and market, please participate in this as well. So either A, you completely agree 100%, B, you mostly agree with that statement, C is kind of agree, D would be somewhat agree, so a little bit less than 50%, and E, totally, completely disagree that I have the data and tools to be able to determine how big is big. So with that, I'll move to the poll question. I'll give about 30 seconds for responses. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay. So interestingly enough, certainly some pretty good coverage in the agree area, but what I do find interesting here is about a quarter of the respondents saying completely disagree. And the reason I want to spend a little bit of time here is that understanding how big is big, being able to size the marketplace or at least understand what the potential is, really does allow you to have much more insight into how you can make adjustments or changes to your sales and marketing strategies to help grow your business, and also how to become more efficient. Keep in mind that in this digital age, we're becoming much more mobile. People are interacting with life sciences companies in very different ways. So many doctors are becoming a lot more comfortable with using laptops and tablets and phones. And so the way in which you interact is not always in the face-to-face interaction. So you have to start thinking about those digital interactions. If you don't have that information that you need to size the market, you're really not quite sure of where you should be spending your time and resources. So key observation for those of us who were in that category E of completely disagree. For those in the completely or mostly agree, that's phenomenal. And hopefully as you move forward, you'll figure out even more efficient ways of using that information and think about some of those new common data sets that we talked about earlier. Okay, the second strategy is to just talk a little bit about leveraging TOV transparency data. So I'm sure that most of the folks here are very familiar with the requirements of the federal government and some of our states to have manufacturers report back to them specific promotional activities as well as some research activities which get published on websites and consumed by hopefully people who are using healthcare, but it seems like a lot of media folks are analyzing this data and crunching it and turning it around and making some conclusions on what's happening. But the key thing is that manufacturers, covered recipients, along with spend type and the transaction amount and date are getting reported in a transactional fashion, line by line, and published to these websites. And essentially what this is doing is it's providing a new area of intelligence for the marketplace. So this fits into kind of the public records areas because it's in the transparency realm, meaning that it's put out there and it's basically out there for general consumption. But essentially what you're getting is you're getting the manufacturer's name, so your company and your competitors. You're understanding who they've interacted with. So the doctor named and identified, usually by either a state identifier or a national identifier. There's a spend type associated with it, so you can determine, was it a meal that was paid for? Was it transportation that was paid for or reimbursed? Was it a consulting fee that was paid by the manufacturer to the individual? And then what is that amount and when did it occur? So this is another bit of intelligence that it now becomes one of those elements, one of those fact data elements to fit into your commercial agility environment. So going back to the example that we talked about before, where we were looking at the key network, as you look at the individual organizations, if I have claims information and I'm able to look at the claims going toward companies A, B, C, and D for the individual practitioners across that continuum, and then let's say I want to look at the transfers of value that are associated with those individuals. Now being able to overlay the two, I'm able to understand what promotional activities are being conducted by the individual companies. I can determine whether or not there's been any significant focus by an organization on a practitioner, and if that has any relation to the claims that are being processed by that particular individual and their relationship to that organization. So it's understanding the system of care, understanding the activities that roll up to the system of care, and now adding this other element, which is transparency data. How are companies interacting with those particular individuals, and what is the nature of the connection? Is it just the reimbursement or paying for a meal, or is it for speaking fees? Is it for consulting? Is this person working with the organization from an R&D perspective? So it's another element that adds some richness to the information that is available to your organization. So I can see where my competitors are focusing their resources. I can see how that lines up with what my organization is doing. I can determine whether or not there's a gap. So is there a space for me to now start interacting with an individual who may be a high potential individual in my marketplace? Do I see any trends? So if I look at this data over time, do I see some insights based on that? Can I look at the promotional activities and whether or not they're working? So I've decided to spend a certain amount of promotional dollars in an area. Am I getting the response that I was looking for? And is that response fading? So maybe there was an initial response, but it's now changing, maybe based on something that a competitor is doing. So it's really understanding those behaviors and the levels where decisions are being made that can be derived by adding this additional element called transparency data. So I'd like to ask another survey question. My organization is making use of transparency data by integrating it with other marketing and sales data to answer the questions about promotional tactics and trends and drug product development. A mouthful to be sure, but essentially answer the question according to these various levels of whether or not you're taking that information that's available through transparency and using it to answer some questions, either about commercial activities or about clinical activities in the marketplace. So A, completely agree, as before. B, mostly agree. C, you agree. D, somewhat. And E, completely disagree. With that, I'll go to the poll. I'll give about 20 seconds for this. Okay, go to the results. So it does look like there's definitely some usage, but again, approximately, it's more than a quarter of the respondents saying that there is not any usage of this. And to be sure, if you start looking at the transparency data, you'll understand that there's some interesting trends in it. There's a lot of activity coming from a core group of manufacturers, and then it starts to tail off relatively quickly. But at the same time, for the folks that are on the phone, you all are part of organizations of varying sizes, probably within the mid-market and some of the larger life sciences companies. So it's relevant to you. So it's relevant to you what your competitors are doing, and also kind of looking at your own information. You may know in the aggregate what your promotional dollars are, but do you really know what it is at the more granular level and how that rolls up to what we describe as systems of care? The insights that you may be able to get from that might be very different from what your assumed understanding of what your promotional spend is and your clinical spend. So just something to be aware of with respect to transparency data. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about the LexisNexis Provider Data Intelligence Suite, which really is the way in which we address the needs around adapting to a commercial agility strategy, the continuum of provider data assets and management of that data. To give you ways of interacting with it starts at the very rudimentary areas of defining authoritative data, just understanding what the systems of care look like at a very granular level, and then moving into more sophisticated uses of it to being able to enhance that data with various enrichment based on business rules, then moving into the area of being able to do real-time validation, so being able to run business rules based on very large sets of data and giving back instantaneous results to your users in the marketplace, be able to make determinations on things like applicability for sampling, the ability to either approve or disapprove the dispensing of prescription drugs to an individual, also determining whether or not certain physicians or organizations fit into various segments, all things that sometimes have to be done in a batch mode, but also can be done in a real-time environment. Then rolling into agile data management, which is really a full-blown, outsourced, real-time data management environment that really leverages understanding what the systems of care are and being able to present that data back in business unit specific views so that you can consume and interact with that data to optimize your experience with it. So with that, I just want to finish on a couple of basic points. First, that having data centralized in a common place where it can be interacted with a common set of tools is key to commercial agility strategy. Technology and services to manage and analyze the data are a combination of working with your trusted partners in the marketplace and having competencies that are business unit specific in your organizations. And that being able to take this information and intelligence is all focused on being able to make actionable, informed insights, such as identifying market opportunities, identifying what relationships are the ones that are important to you so that you can build commercial models and customer-based promotional plans that are very specific to your area of focus, and also being able to incorporate compliance information and research information for predicting what's happening in the marketplace, understanding what's the next how big is big question that needs to be answered. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and move into answering some questions that have been provided by the attendees here. So I'm going to switch over and take a look, see what we have. Okay, so first question is, how up-to-date is the information that is coming from data providers to define systems of care? It's a good question. It's really all over the board. And so in order to be able to keep pace with it, the environment for establishing systems of care has to have real-time capabilities. It's one of the reasons why we talked about big data in this presentation is that the technologies that are associated with big data allow for the managing of this data in real time. And in order to be able to generate what those systems of care look like, understanding all the changes that are occurring in the marketplace on an hour-by-hour basis you have to have a real-time engine to be able to do that. So the information really is as up to date as the marketplace can bear, and if you're working with the right partner, they should be able to pull that information in and make it available to its downstream customers. I know that's something definitely that we do at LexisNexis, and hopefully you're working with partners to do the same. All right, I'll move on to the next question. How can we allow business users to help manage affiliations without losing centralized control of master data and systems of care? Okay, that's a very good question. I noticed that one of the biggest concerns that I hear from organizations when they're trying to manage this data is that if you have too much feedback coming from your end users, that it becomes unmanageable. And also, you start to depend too heavily on your end users to provide that information. Success really is in going with a centralized trusted source. And the best way to get that is by being able to use, I would say, objective criteria for determining what these relationships look like. I know one of the effective ways that I've been able to do that working with my organization is through claims data to be able to actually verify that activity is happening in specific locations. So if I'm able to verify that objectively, then I can use that to determine when a relationship should be connected, right, and when it should be broken. So if I start to see that activity is occurring at a higher volume, I can pull the switch and say, yes, there's an official relationship that's here. And not only that, I can look at the level of activity that's occurring. So let's say in the example of claims data, I can start looking at the number of claims and determine, yes, this relationship exists because 80% of their activity, let's say, is in product A, the example we used in this presentation. So that's how you do it. I think you rely on that authoritative source. And in some areas where you have unique intelligence, if you use the right information governance approach to managing that data, meaning you have a very, very controlled process for allowing input from your end users, that can be governed as well. Let's see, how does real-time updating of customer data work if sources only provide and accept updates weekly or monthly? Okay, so that's a good point. Well, think about when you are buying data from a source. Your expectation is that they're probably getting data all the time, right? And you're getting a delivery from them once a week, once a month, once a quarter. So it's no different in your own environment. You can have a centralized repository that can be the up-to-date vision of that system of care. Then what you do is you control what we call publishing. You control what view of that goes out to the end systems. So if I can use a point-in-time approach to say anything past January 1st, I'm not going to make any changes to my specialties, to my primary address, et cetera, but I will allow a change to a phone number, let's say. I can hold those changes back until the next critical date, which might be April 1st. Then on April 1st, I might have a refreshing of my downstream systems. That doesn't change what the central repository has. It always has the most up-to-date information, and you just share with your downstream target systems what they need based on their business rules. Let's see, what are the costs to implement and manage a system that manages systems of care and enables commercial agility? So what I'll say is that, back to what I referred to earlier in terms of pay-as-you-go, these are becoming more as-a-service type offerings. So here are the things to remember. That as-a-service typically includes costs for data, some sort of partnership on information governance, some ongoing service component to make sure you're getting the data when and how you need it. And then there's the technology component. So that's usually a combination of the platform, which is the infrastructure and the software, and then the business services that are integrated on top of that. So when you put that all together, what I would say is it's very similar probably to what you see in the CRM space for software as a service, maybe a little bit above that because it's relatively new to the as-a-service paradigm, but very much so. Those are the components that make up your costs, and it's probably somewhere similar in volume and cost of what you're seeing in the CRM space, which has taken about 15 years to get from proprietary systems to software as a service. So we're probably about 10, 15 years to catch up in the commercial data or master data world. So just look at those elements when you think about cost. We are at the top of the hour, so I want to thank everybody, and I'm going to pass this back to Claire to conclude and wrap up. So thank everybody very much.
Okay, great. And this is Claire back on the line. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Darryl, along with our co-sponsor, LexisNexis, and all the attendees for joining us today. Please note, we will be sending a post-event feedback form via email before the close of business today. This will include a link to other materials on the LexisNexis Life Sciences website for additional reading. You are also welcome to submit additional questions or comments via this form. This now concludes our webinar.